Hey all, new day, new verse as we continue on into Galatians. Today we are picking up with chapter 6, and I think we're doing verses 1 to 6 today. And when I was going through it earlier, I was just looking at places through Matthew and different places where it just stuck out to me and just struck me quite well. So, before we get into it, Lord, give me the words that are meant to be heard. Place this where you meant to be have, and just prosper it, Lord God. Let it build and strengthen those who hear it, and just use this to bring glory to your kingdom. In Jesus' name, amen. So, picking up at chapter 6, verse 1. Dear brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by some sin, you who are godly should gently and humbly help that person back onto the right path. And be careful not to fall into the same temptation yourself. Share each other's burdens, and in this way obey the law of Christ. If you think you are too important to help someone, you're only fooling yourself. You are not that important. Isn't that just helpful, though? Like in a world that's like, oh, I've got to be important, oh, I need prestige, oh, I need to be known. And you're not that important, but you're not supposed to be. In God himself, you're not supposed to see yourself as that important. You are supposed to be living for others. So when it's this superficial, all-about-me life, well, that's why it's superficial, because we're not designed that way. We're designed in other-centric existence. We're designed to have other-centered love. And it's because we are his creation. We are made in his image. Yahweh God, 3 persons, 1 being. He is a community of other-centric love by his very nature. So, being an image of him, would it not be logical that we would be bearing that out? That we would be designed to live in other-centric love? Anyway, back to verse 4. Sorry for the tangent there. Pay careful attention to your own work. For then you will get the satisfaction of a job well done. You won't need to compare yourself to anyone else. I'll say verse 4 again. Pay careful attention to your own work. What God has set before you, what God has you meant to do. For then you will get the satisfaction of a job well done. Because you're not doing it for the boss. You're not doing it for the paycheck. You're doing it unto the glory of God. You're doing it as a sacrifice of praise. We're doing it because we love him. And because doing it with a smile is giving with a generous heart. Giving with that place of joy. Banding the dressing of somebody who may not know better. We are each responsible for our own conduct. Driving it home right there. He's put it well. We're each responsible for our own conduct. What are we going to do? Are we going to decide to live? Are we going to decide to love? Are we going to decide to be real image bearers? Or are we going to focus on the altar of me? That's kind of the 2-tree, 2-path blessing here. It comes down to either or option. You can't serve 2 masters. He is God, or we end up trying to make ourselves God. It's kind of the choice it comes down to. Are we going to be made in God's image, or are we going to try and serve a God who's made in our own? That's the real question. That's the real, we need to have it out with this. Is the love letter in here is talking about all humanity being equal. So we're not comparing ourselves to others because we're each doing our own job. The heart does not compare itself to the ear. The heart would make a lousy ear. The ear makes a lousy eyeball. When each is doing its own task, and this isn't a stay-in-your-lane philosophy, this is a trusting your calling and knowing that when God says do this, we are a good and faithful servant, that he is pleased in us, that he has died for us. So we're not comparing ourselves to others. We're not trying to judge by the Joneses or keeping up with them or anything else by that. We're going, okay, God, this is what I was able to do. Show me how to do it better. Learn me how to be closer to you. Bring me closer to you. Being those deeper relationship places. Because we are each responsible for our own conduct. We are each responsible for what we put out. You can't control somebody else. And I think that's the biggest issue here we're seeing. And, pardon me for dipping into the world for a moment to discuss it, but I think this is the biggest issue we see with social media. Or, if you'll pardon the expression, Karen. It's this need to superimpose one's authority or moral standing on top of another. That is the idea to it. We may have given it a name in recent years, which, oh, I'm so sorry for anyone who actually has the name Karen. Like, God just bolster your soul, because it's crap. I knew people who grew up in the 90s, hey, give it to Mikey, he'll eat anything. I hate you people so much. So God give you strength through that, because, yeah. The core of the behavior is trying to impose our own belief on somebody else. We're trying to be responsible for other people. We're not because there's a difference here. And this is where nuance comes in, because the idea in Genesis, your brother's keeper. Well, how do you be your brother's keeper? There's a right way and a wrong way. Being involved, being invested, being there, knowing the person. Not being an armchair critic, but being actively involved in that person's life to help correct them. That's being your brother's keeper, because you are on a relationship that could be called brotherly. You know each other, sisterly, familial. You know each other's ins and outs, your screw-ups. You can be real with each other. If you don't know the person, if you don't know their story, if you haven't walked a mile in their shoes, how can you give advice to them, especially if you don't know them that well? Oh, well, I know them from afar, so I'm going to judge them from afar. Well, I'm really glad that my God is up close and personal, because that kind of distance thing, you can be really blind to the small things. And that's the ticker of it. When we're responsible for our own conduct, when we lay what we're doing down as an offering before the Lord, a sacrifice of praise, we don't have to focus on what they're doing, or what she's doing, or he's doing, or the left is doing, or the right is doing, or it doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is to do what God has called us to do. Like, okay, well, what are we supposed to do? Well, let's start with Micah 6:8 and build from there. To live justly, to pursue this righteousness, to love mercy, to show mercy to others, and to walk humbly with God, to understand that He is God, we are not. There's our first step. Humility, recognizing He knows the way we do not. Because the biggest lie that I think we've ever told generation to generation is that we come up and grow up and we end up knowing what we're doing. It's the biggest crock. But it's one that we feed every next generation. It's right up there with, oh, the next one will be better. And when talking about worldly things, elementary school, oh, junior high gets better. No, because it's still playing the same worldly games. It still clicks, it's still biting, it's still this lesser behavior. It continues on and on and on and on. Because that kind of thing won't improve, because that entire thing is focused on the wrong kind of other. It's not about helping each other, it's about judging each other. And that's the major difference. That's the major core of it, we're sharing in each other's burdens, not blaming each other for having them. When our hearts are hearing the person who is suffering, not saying, oh, well, sucks to be you. Oh, told you so. Oh, your own damn fault. Thank you, I'm aware that I am responsible for why I am here. Didn't need that. Didn't need a shoulda, coulda, or a woulda while I'm going through a Job moment. Thank you for nothing, you colossal pain. Because when you're in those moments, that's what it is. It's that we're going to judge each other, we're going to judge each other's stripes, we're going to judge each other's sufferings, instead of recognizing we are healed by His blood. He carries our burdens, all of our burdens, so we have no place to judge each other. Instead of judging, we can encourage. So when somebody says, oh, I'm having a difficult time with this, we can bolster them. We can rise by lifting each other up. Like I said earlier, love letter, about all humanity being equal. It's this elevation. It's everything being lifted up. I was talking to somebody about the difference between animals and pets. And they're like, they're talking with animals, oh, they don't have a soul, they don't have personality, they're just, very, 13th, 17th century European. Anyway, inconsequential on that end. But I was talking to them, it's like, well, you can see their personality, you can see their souls, you can see how they actively believe. It's like, well, then, doesn't that lessen? No, it elevates man. All life is valuable. All life is the work of His hand. He breathes life into all creation. If he holds his breath back, all of it withers. Mountain, sea, river, ocean, people, time. If he holds his breath back, it all withers to nothing. And so focusing on the fact that we are all elevated up, that we are creatures of the earth, we are Adonai. We are earthlings. We are made of the earth like the animals. We have more. We have the Spirit of God, the breath in us. So it raises everything up. It doesn't flatten anything. It turns human beings into the very good creation we are, that has to own that we make some very stupid choices. Because when we start there, we can go with the fact that we want judgment. We want justice for those stupid choices. For our own, for other people's. And then we start talking about the fact that Jesus took it on the cross. That justice has been met. That there is no reason to try and strike vengeance because God has already taken care of it 2,000 years ago on the cross. It's nailed there. Our burdens, our sufferings. We lay down the parts of us that need to not be there. And when we're bearing each other's burdens, the best way to avoid falling into those same temptations is to avoid the kind of yeast. I was looking at Matthew when I was reading through this. And I was looking at the parable. Actually, it may have been at Mark at the time. But it was the parable talking about the yeast. Pharisee yeast and Herod yeast. And these verse sections here, and verse 6, for those who are taught the word of God should provide for their teachers, sharing all good things with them. I want to go back to, because I did say we would go through verse 6, but with the section I want to go through here is be careful not to fall into the same temptation. The easiest way to not fall into the same temptation, to not fall into those yeast places, is to watch for it. When you want to condemn. Because here's the thing, and I know I may have glanced about this a little bit, and then Lord help me share it the way you showed it to me. You've got Herod yeast and Sadducee yeast, or Pharisee yeast. One is trying to be in love, or being loved by others, being focused on by other people. Let's see, I wrote it down here. So many notes, so much scribbling, my apologies. Maybe notes in a separate section. Yeah, because it was the... my apologies. You can truly see that it is just raw. The part I was looking at was the Pharisee yeast of the wanting to judge. The legalism. I didn't commit that. And then the Herod yeast of wanting to be liked. Herod... depending on the Herod you're talking about, the first Herod, he was chosen to be a puppet king. None of the Jews liked him, so everything he did, he was trying to win popularity. And so these are the two yeasts that I see quickest boil into our lives from the outside world. It's either the yeast of trying to be the popular center of attention, or it's the yeast of trying to go, well, I'm morally superior to you. No one is moral superior to anybody. The one being who is and has all right to be came to serve, not to be served. And he said it himself, if the master goes through that, should the servants expect any better? That we go through these things too. And so the way to avoid the wanting to be popular is by knowing that we are seen. Because that's the core need, isn't it? I want to be seen. I want to be known. The world, the mob, is a fickle crowd. It will see you for a moment, but there's a reason we have the 15 minutes of fame kind of idea. Because the mob moves on very quickly. Instead of realizing God sees us. He saw us in our mother's wombs, in their hidden places, knitting us together fiber by fiber, strand by strand, knowing the numbers of our hairs on our heads, knowing every single day before we've lived to one. And I couldn't tell you which of the addresses the Psalms those are, but I know every single one of those is Psalms. Either Message version, CJB, or NLT. They're all from the Psalms. God sees us so. And that's how those promises are how we ignore, how we disregard, how we cast out the Herod yeast. How we focus on our own work. We remember that God is working in us. We work alongside him as he teaches us, he learns us. We move in this relationship place. And so it's not about the task that we may be doing individually. It's about the tasks in here that affect the tasks out here. The head affecting the hand. And now we're back to the Shema. The way to avoid the Pharisee yeast is to remember the humility. Right there in verse 1 of chapter 6. You who are godly should gently and humbly help them. How can you help someone humbly if you're standing over them saying, I told you so? How can you help somebody humbly if you go, yep, you screwed up. I would have done this. No. You listen. You hear. You hold the truth. You remind gently of truth. You know? I fell back into the temptation for... Let's pull a couple examples, eh? I fell back into the temptation of looking at pornography. Oh, that's a tough one. It is. You know, especially when you're dealing with the pleasure centers of the brain. I mean, you're literally working against biochemistry on this one. And it does talk like, well, Lord, help with the self-control fruit, because it's a difficult one. And it's needing to go back and remember that God has made each person in his image. So we don't want to devalue them. Because, the first thought is the pleasure side, but the thought the real sin that we see echo after is the devaluing the person. And so we devalue ourselves. And so sex ends up becoming a shameful thing instead of a gift from God to share with our spouse in covenant marriage. You know? I have a feeling that was for somebody, because I couldn't repeat it again if I tried. You know, I'm just looking at these places. I'm looking at how we avoid these yeasts. You know, the other difficult things, I wanted to be popular. I want to be the center of attention. I want to be seen. That's a big one. Especially in today's society, especially with girls. Oh, nightmare hell. Oh yeah, you need to be the it girl, you need to be seen, you need to be known, you need to be popular. And then of course with the way certain things the sex sells, that you end up having to put out a little bit more so you get attention, but that's not the kind of attention you want, so you end up debasing yourself, so you end up demoralizing each other, and so both go into the relationship with a ton of personal baggage because both have seen themselves as lesser human beings because they've sold their bodies in order to get attention. Man, ain't being human a pain in the ass. Can we just own that for a moment? It is difficult. That's why it's so good news that our God knows what it's like. He took all the suck and he died for it. On the cross, crucified with him. So he knows the struggles. So we can surrender and just thank him for the strength he gives. Because in moments when we're in Gethsemane with him, sitting there almost ready to sweat blood from the suck, we're in it with him, and he's praying with us. He's never letting us go. He's never leaving us. He's never forsaking us, and he's never abandoning us. These are the difficult things that the world throws at us that are shallow and full of complexity, that set you for a spin and leave you wondering what the hell's going on. And the simple truth of it is you are valuable. You are valued. You are worth more than any human being could ever conceive or understand. Because you are valued by God. You are loved by He who is love. You are meant for beauty. Yes, there is a great deal of fecal matter in this world. There is a lot of it. And it's holding to the truth. Yes, sorrows may last for the night, and sometimes the night is long as shit. But joy comes with the morning. And I apologize for the profanities on this one. I just want to be real. I mean, this world is going insane and is trying to take everyone right along with it. And it's being filled with that that Herod yeast of, I want to be the center of attention. I want to be seen by the crowd. I want to be important. I want to be accepted. Because we're not holding to the truth that we are accepted by God. Died for by God. Like Jesus died for us. You can't get any more love than that. Especially when Jesus himself says the greatest act of love you could do for another is to die in their place. He did. The Pharisee Yeast, the holier than thou, I haven't screwed up, all have sinned and fallen short. The moment we start thinking we're better than somebody else, the moment we start thinking that we're too important to help someone, we are truly fooling ourselves, because no one is that important. And I say that because the only one being at all who is Yeshua, God made flesh, again, as I said before, came to serve, not be served. So shouldn't our lives look just a little bit the same? Shouldn't we be focused on our own conduct, what's inside each and every one of us, ourselves, letting this get right, letting him deal with the log in our own eye, letting him deal with the broken places that we don't even know to bring up or how to comprehend because they've been hidden so long, and let him heal. And as he heals, let our lives be a testimony of his healing grace to others who are just as hurting as we were and are. Let our lives be always preaching, and when necessary, words. And that's coming as somebody who loves to talk about anything, because I see his grace on everything. Even in the worst, shadowy, difficult of places, it's refining fire. It's blade sharpening blade, iron sharpening iron. Doesn't make it easy. Certainly not. Doesn't make it enjoyable, far from it. It does prove that he is good, because he is using everything for my good and his glory, because I love him so. And I love him because he loved me first. And we start getting that truth into our being, then no yeast, the Pharisee, Sadducee, or the world is going to enter in, because of the peace of God will be guarding our hearts. I will see you guys on Tuesday as we continue on with chapter 6, probably picking up at verse 7. May his favor be upon you. Know that you are loved. And don't give up hope. And for those of you who see this that are affected by the loss of Queen Elizabeth, joy will come with the morning. God sees to every need. So give it to him. He'll see you through. I'll see you then.